It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLabPGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLabPGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, FitLabPGH@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at FitLabPGH. Already a fan of FitLabPGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLabPGH is back for another podcast interview. We have gone over a bridge, but not through a tunnel, to be up on Perry Highway this afternoon. It's a rainy afternoon in September, and I have not told today's guest this, but the pressure is on him, just like every other guest that we interview in a coffee shop. So we are with Fred Gohh. He is the owner of PTHelper, which he's going to tell us about. And Fred, every time we have interviewed somebody in a coffee shop, we've had a great conversation. So no pressure.
Well, I certainly hope that this is very interesting for you.
And one of the things that I think is very interesting, not just about Fred specifically, but how there are so few degrees of separation for people who are involved in the movement field. I was in an elevator in Indianapolis at the National Strength and Conditioning Association conference wearing my badge with my name and my alphabet soup of initials. And Fred got into the elevator and looked at my tag and said, "Oh, I'm from Pittsburgh too." And we got to talking and asked him what he did. He has a business called PTHelper, which he's going to talk us about. And then I said, "Hey, you want to be on a podcast?" And he was either smart enough or foolish enough to say, "Yes, I want to be on a podcast." We were chatting a few minutes before we started recording, and I happened to mention somebody that I've interviewed for both FitLab Pittsburgh and Moving to Live, Menachem Brody. And Fred goes, "Oh, I know him from cycling." So already there is somebody who is familiar with both of my podcasts and with Fred. So it's a small world. And Fred, I want to thank you for taking time on a rainy afternoon to come talk to FitLab Pittsburgh about your experiences as a lifetime mover and your business PTHelper, which I think takes advantage of technology without letting technology take over.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I guess my first question I always ask people from FitLab Pittsburgh is, because I am not a Pittsburgh native, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you here? If you are not a Pittsburgh native, why the heck did you come here?
Well, I am definitely not a Pittsburgh native. I was originally born in the Philippines, lived in Vancouver, then Toronto, and then moved to Pittsburgh. So it turns out that when I was in college in Toronto, one of my colleagues eventually became a CMU professor and started a company called Scalable Networks and recruited me to come down. And my wife had just given birth and she had a 6-month maternity leave, and we were planning to come down for 6 months. And we've now been here for about 22 years.
And was it the job that kept you here, the city that kept you here, or a combination of factors?
I would say it was a combination of factors. Certainly the job opportunity was very different here in the US versus in Canada. And certainly what we did find is that people here were very, very friendly, and also very safe. We're one of the few circumstances where we accidentally left our front door open while we went out, coming back and being like, what the heck? and nothing was taken. No one ever showed up to our door. So we feel very safe here in Pittsburgh.
And I know I'm also curious about people because you were talking to me a little bit beforehand. You are a cyclist. And what I find with people who are lifetime movers, because you're my age or maybe a little older, we've been around a few decades, you have a goal of cycling up Alpe d'Huez, which is one of the famous cycling climbs in the Tour de France. And so clearly you are not somebody who kind of dabbles in exercise. It's something that you really, really enjoy doing because nobody wants to climb up a mountain in the Alps just kind of on a whim. And my question to you is, have you been a mover all your life, or was it something you found maybe in school? And then kind of a follow-up question to that is, were your parents movers? Maybe not officially athletes, but they always did active and moving things. I was fortunate enough to interview somebody recently who said, well, my parents were active. They weren't really athletes, but I grew up on an organic farm and we were always working. So I found that people either move later in life, usually when they go to college, and maybe they have a really good college experience for a year or two and realize, ooh, I don't feel so good. Or it's normal to them to move doing something. So which were you, early or late to it?
Well, I guess I was an early mover. I always played, being from the Philippines, played basketball. That was the first love sport. Played basketball in elementary school all the way through high school, and played some, I guess, club sport in basketball in college as well. After college, I started cycling because partly a commuting opportunity. Also, I really enjoyed the feel of the wind in my hair when I still had hair. And eventually found a group of friends in Toronto who would go cycling every weekend. And early, when I was much younger, we would be the hardcore, what we call hammerheads, and you'd push as hard as fast as you can go, which at the time seemed like a lot of fun. Over time, I've gotten a lot slower, but also still continue to enjoy cycling a lot. I guess, I can do cycling usually 3 times during the week, and Saturdays and Sundays as well. And have recently, I guess, more than 5 years now, have been doing Team Sidious, which is a junior cycling program where we get young kids from 9 years old all the way up to 18 and introduce them to the cycling sport.
Which is really cool because people who just see the cyclists out there in the spandex and the fancy jerseys looking very, very smooth going up the hills to North Park don't realize that cycling really is a lifetime sport. You can do it up into your 80s, and you can start as young as, I think I rode my first bicycle, my sister's bike with training wheels, when I was probably 5 years old.
Well, definitely, it's certainly a lifetime sport. And just, I think last weekend, ran into Oscar Swan riding on Freeport Road, and he's something like 86 years old and going by himself in his old track shoes, and just keeps going. And, when you come approach from behind, you'd never know he was 86 years old.
Favorite place to ride in Pittsburgh? I'm always curious to find interesting places to ride. And you don't have to give away the secret spot that you don't want to tell anyone about.
Well, we typically start from North Park, J.C. Stonefield, and head north from there. And we occasionally go to Swickley and do a nice coffee stop there, as well as going up to Harmony and I guess as far north as Prospect. And then we go east towards Saxonburg and Oakmont, I guess.
My story about Prospect, my parents used to live there. And when I was visiting them when I was in graduate school with my mountain bike, I decided I was going to do a short road ride on my mountain bike, got lost and circumvented Lake Arthur on my mountain bike with 1 bottle of water. I remember hitting Route 19 and going, ooh, I got a problem here.
Well, hopefully you didn't bonk and you made it home safely.
Only road cycling, or do you dabble in cyclocross, mountain biking, fat tire biking?
Primarily road biking. I find that mountain biking is probably too hazardous for my health, because I find that I'm already crashing often enough on the road bike.
And then what do you do in the winter? Do you ride outside year round, or do you force yourself to go in and have the trainer madness?
Well, we try to go outside as much as often. If the roads are icy, we don't go outside just because we think it's too risky. Also, at our age, we don't heal as quickly. And so as a result, I've also unfortunately taken the indoor cycling approach and have, become a Zwift subscriber and been doing those kind of trainings indoors.
So anything to keep the pedals turning indoors or outdoors?
Well, it also helps keep the weight off because I do like to eat.
That's the benefit of the cycling. You can eat what you want. Not really, but maybe a little bit more than if you were inactive.
Oh, certainly.
So I've already given away your secret of what your bucket list item is to try to climb Alpe d'Huez. On the other end of the spectrum, for you, if you're hanging out with your buddies or you want to impress somebody at a trade conference, the most unusual or interesting movement activity that you've done in the past, and would you do it again?
In the past? Well, okay, I've done a marathon, and since then I've already torn my ACL twice, so I don't intend to ever do a marathon again. Let's see, I've also climbed Haleakala, which was a unique experience. Took a lot longer than I expected for something like 36 miles, but you get to hit 10,000 feet. So probably Haleakala was my most interesting event.
Would you do it again?
Definitely. It was, it was interesting because I rode up and unsupported, and you get to the top and you realize it's freezing cold and you got to go down 10,000 feet. And at that point, you're going down 10,000 feet, your fingers are cold, there's really no guardrails around the roads, and you got to make sure you don't ride your bike off the road. And your fingers get very cramped holding on the brakes all the way down.
I haven't gone that, but I have gone down places in North Carolina where it's the same thing. You're maybe at 6,000 feet and you're going down and going, there's no guardrails here. So it kind of makes you a little more attuned with your riding.
Most definitely. You become very conscious of how quickly you're going into those curves.
And I know the other aspect of what Fred does is why we're so interested in talking to him is his business, PTHelper. You mentioned that you were going to school in Toronto and you were living in Toronto and you were invited to come out here or down here to Pittsburgh and help out with a startup. Clearly that wasn't PTHelper. For people who are not familiar with PTHelper, and I confess prior to meeting you in the elevator, I was not, and that's partially because of the knowledge silos and partially, as I think you can probably tell us about, there are so many companies out there involved in the movement, sports medicine, physical therapy, whatever your favorite catch term is, that it's hard to keep track with all of them. Oh,
definitely. Certainly in the physical therapy space is very siloed compared to the athletic training and personal fitness. So, I guess the background here is from my cycling days, I guess way back in 2013, maybe, I had a bad series of crashes on my bicycle.
None of them your fault, I'm sure.
Well, sure. Unfortunately in June, I dislocated my shoulder while doing a bike tour in Italy. And so coming back, fortunately, didn't need surgery and started rehab and worked with a great physical therapist here in Pittsburgh that worked with me. And around October timeframe, he's finally said to me, I think you don't need to come back for physical therapy. You can, you're on your own. You keep doing the exercises. And the following Sunday, I crashed again and broke my other collarbone on the other side and 4 ribs and punctured a lung. So that Monday, I sent him a picture of my x-rays and says, hey, I'm going to be coming in next week. And since then, that's another about 4 months or 5 months of physical therapy. And that even though he's wonderful, I got really tired of doing physical therapy exercises.
And paying the copayment every time you went to physical therapy.
Yes, certainly, it does influence the cost, but, the attention and the work that they've done is, certainly gotten me back to where I feel I'm very equal or better than I was before.
I think it's important also to note that Fred is a longtime cyclist, and I'm sure he would agree with me that if you cycle a lot, you can be divided into 2 groups. Those who haven't crashed yet, and those who have crashed. So it's kind of a recreational hazard, but if you get into the sport, the positives far outweigh those occasional negatives where maybe you break a bone or end up with some road rash.
Well, I ride maybe about 5,000 miles a year. And so I sort of have this mentality is that if I crash once a year, I'm doing okay. Even though if it's maybe just a little, scrape on the elbow or scrape on the knee, that's considered a crash. I'm doing okay. If I'm doing much worse than that, then it's a bad year.
So you've had your share of physical therapy, not meaning to jinx you, but at some point, if you continue to cycle 5,000 miles, something's going to catch up with you. Oh. But you also have developed this PTHelper, and this came directly from your injuries and not wanting to go to PT?
Well, it's not so much not wanting to go to PT, because if you've been to PT, you're supposed to do home exercises on your own. And you basically, as you're progressing along, you're maybe seeing the physical therapist once a week or once every other week.
And I forget who I was talking to as a physical. Actually, I do remember. Dr. Maury Kolber said that it's often more important, the home exercises, than what you do in those once weekly sessions, because going to those once weekly sessions, if you'd follow the home exercises, then the physical therapist can progress you. If you are like many, many patients and you don't do the home exercises for whatever the reason, then your recovery is slower, or you can say, well, I've got a bad shoulder. I broke it riding my bike and I haven't been able to ride since then. Clearly you fall into the former category who religiously does your home exercises.
Yeah. And even being, I would say, I guess you say religious about it, it still became a hassle. You still have to count your hold times. You have to count your reps and sets. And unfortunately, lose track. And that's the type, that's the function that really bothers me, losing count of my doing exercise, and sometimes even forgetting which exercises you have to do. So the app that I developed was to help me as an individual remember all my exercises, as well as count the reps and count the hold times for me, so that I would never have to encounter this frustration again.
And I want to talk about this a little bit more, because most people, and I would probably fall into the most people, I have various notes that I keep on whatever my note program is on my computer or on my smartphone, saying, okay, these are my back rehab exercises. These are my exercises I do to loosen my hips up. And I have lists and lists of these, and some of them I have little videos or little pictures. I classify myself as a tech geek who likes technology, but has absolutely no knowledge on how to go about an app. I suspect if I knew how to do an app, it's like I'd be doing that for my own use. When you got tired of counting, or you got frustrated because you lost track of them, was your immediate thought is, well, because of my background in computers, I can design an app for this? Or was this how did this come about?
Well, certainly, my background is electrical engineering, and I've been working with a lot of software developers and hardware developers creating products. So the first thing that said is like, oh, come on, it's been like 15 years since I've had my last physical therapy, and they're still giving me the same pieces of paper. So, there must be an app out there that can help me. And so obviously you first look out to see if there's something already there. And there was nothing that quickly came to mind that you could just, if you were given your papers to do your exercises, you could find those exercises and add them to your own workout routine. And so that's sort of the foundation of how the product started, where there didn't seem that there wasn't anything out there that matched my needs. And then as my background, you had to write appropriate document of how the software is supposed to behave. And that's how it started. And working with my physical therapist, who gave me all of their exercises that they recommend for the different body parts.
Was the idea originally, hey, I might try to make this a business, or was this is going to benefit me for my long-term exercise use?
Well, it started out, it's like, it's got to benefit me first. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much value. But certainly then I started, when you're in the physical therapy, you get to work beside, work out beside other patients. And you start talking. It's like, you have this problem. And they all seem to have the same problems I did. They all lost their papers or couldn't forget to remember their exercises. And they all hate losing count. That seems to be a very common theme. And so that's how it started, and just like asking other people as the idea developed, what kind of experiences they had at physical therapy.
So this is an app. Is it for a computer, for an iPhone, for a Droid, for all three?
It's really geared for the smartphone. So it's available on iOS, on Android. We do have a web service which is geared toward the therapists themselves, or right now also the personal trainers, where they can prescribe exercises to their clients or patients.
And I think I remember from talking to you in Indianapolis, there are, and I'm probably using the wrong phrasing, 2 different versions or 2 different ways this app can be used. It can be used as a consumer and kind of as a exercise producer, which is what you would call the physical therapist or the personal trainer. Am I phrasing that correctly, or can you improve on the phrasing?
Well, so the web service, which is geared for the therapist or the personal trainer or the athletic trainer, allows them to prescribe exercises to their clients and patients. It then gives them the opportunity it generates a unique code for that individual who are they prescribed the exercises for. The patient or client can get our app, enter their code, and then the exercises that were prescribed by their health professional will automatically synchronize with their phone, and then they don't have to look for their exercise. It's available on their app right away. I'm
currently using a HRV, heart rate variability app. And what I've learned is if I sync my device, my chest strap, or my finger sensor with one of my smart devices, I can't sync that same device with another device. So it's making me think that with your app, if I've got an iPad and an iPhone, can I have the app on both of them as long as I have that unique code from my provider for the exercises?
Certainly. It's available on multiple devices, and one of the concepts of how we think it can be also used by personal trainers. They can generate one exercise program and then give it to like a class. So then the whole class can then also synchronize all their exercises, and they can all do it separately at their convenient time.
I know you would probably agree with me. There are probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of exercises that would be beneficial for either teaching clients or patients or for people to use in their programming. How do you decide on what exercises get in the app? So if I decide as somebody who does a little bit of personal training, I'm going to use your website, and I'm assuming there's a fee, and they can go to your website for more information, contact you directly. And maybe I've got 8 or 9 exercises that I really, really like to use with my cycling clients. How do I get those exercises in the app, or are they already on the app?
Well, we do have about 700 exercises currently in the app, and we're always constantly looking for new exercises to add. We do recognize that no matter how many exercises we add into the app, someone will have a different variation of those exercises. So what we do is provide the health professional the ability to create their own exercises. They can add their own pictures, their own descriptions. They can also add links into, say a YouTube or other type of video source that the user can then watch before they do their exercises.
Is it possible for me as a provider of the exercises who's using the app with my clients or patients, can I take my own video and put it directly in the app, or would the app have to link to YouTube or some other video site?
So the app doesn't use video directly. It uses illustrations to sort of do animation. So it allows us to minimize the bandwidth that the user will use, as well as the memory space available on their phones. So by doing animation, it walks through the exercises, but with actually creating video. So our philosophy is that the therapist or the trainer has taught the individual how to do the exercises correctly. And the app is really there as a support to reinforce what they've learned, but primarily to help them actually do the exercises. So we're not so much focused on education and teaching the person how to do the exercises correctly, but actually getting them to do the exercise.
But would it be possible for me as the provider of the exercises to create the exercises with the pictures in the app, and then from what you said, have a link maybe to my own personal website or a YouTube channel saying, just as a reminder for more tips on the exercise, or if you forget exactly what you're supposed to do, go to this site?
Yeah, certainly within the descriptions, you can add a link to any website that's convenient for you. I
know, having gone through physical therapy and having worked in a physical therapy clinic, I completely agree with you on the papers. I've spoken before on this podcast. About a year ago, I was undergoing physical therapy for a herniated disc in my back, and I would literally walk out with the papers and enter them into my smartphone because, as you said, I knew there was no way in the world that I was going to remember where those papers were. And I still have those lists. Somebody who's listening to this, somebody who's involved in the physical therapy or personal training field, is there a limit to the number of exercises? Because I think you've been through enough physical therapy like me. You get some physical therapists or personal trainers who go literally hog wild on the number of exercises, and they want to put everything up there.
Is that when you're prescribing exercises to an individual? Prescribing
it. So if I decide I'm going to use, I teach a few personal training clients on the side, and I decide I want to use your website to prescribe or utilize exercises for my clients. Is there a limit to the number of exercises that I can have on the app?
Definitely not. You can prescribe as many exercises to your patients or clients as you like. Of course, it's going to take them forever to get done. One thing I've been interesting to discover as I've gotten into the physical therapy space is that some therapists, because so few people actually do their exercises, they keep their prescribed exercises to a very minimum. So I think they only will give them like 3 to 5 exercises to do at home at any given time.
I know a couple of therapists who say, I give 3 home exercises and I'm really happy if one of them is done.
Yeah. So, one thing we discovered is supposedly, according to studies, 70% of PT patients don't do the exercises at all.
That's pretty close to what I asked my therapist last year. I said, what percentage of your patients do it? And he said, you mean the ones who actually do it or the ones who tell me they do it? He said, I think probably about 20% of my patients do what I tell them to do. So 20 to 30%. Right in there, depending on who it is. I'm curious also because wellness and online personal training is taking off now also. If I'm somebody who's working as a personal trainer and I want to use PTHelper, is that something where I can, for example, have, say, 150 exercises and select different routines for different clients?
Definitely. We do have the ability for what we call the user to generate templates so that it can group exercises together so that it can easily find and prescribe those exercises to individuals and then change them over time as they prescribe different exercises as they progress from one level to the next.
We're talking about PTHelper. It is an app for people who are prescribed exercises for physical therapy, or they are given exercises by their personal trainer or wellness professional. For the person who is the professional, PTHelper comes with a website that allows you to add in exercises. And is it also with the website when you get it, are there already exercises that come with it? So somebody, if I decide, hey, I want to get this, I want to purchase this, are there exercises already loaded in, or am I responsible for creating all of the exercises to give to my patients or to my clients?
So there are already exercises available and sorted based upon the body part. So the ankles and foot are grouped together. So altogether, we have about 700 exercises. And we're always looking for more exercises. We get feedback from therapists as to what they look to get. And so we will develop new exercises with those as well.
How long has this app been available?
The app has been available for about 3 years now. We've been downloaded in about 100 countries. And, finding that everyone has to do basically the same exercises wherever they are located.
And I don't know if you've done this. I know for podcasting, I was talking to a friend of mine who also does podcasts, Eric Malzone, and we were looking at the downloads for the podcast. And it's amazing some of the small countries where you see this, and I'm sure you think the same way. It's like, how does somebody he had 4 downloads in Saudi Arabia. And his comment was, I wonder how somebody in Saudi Arabia heard about the Fitness Blitz podcast. Do you ever wonder when you look at that where they're downloaded, how did they find out about it? Or do you do any surveys or marketing to find out how they found out about it?
Certainly with 100 countries, I think we basically almost covered the whole world. And, we say, it's like, well, do we know anybody there? It's like, how did they find out about it? And I'm not sure how we will ever be able to figure out how they became aware of our app. So it's pretty phenomenal, I guess, the benefits of technology to be able to distribute this kind of capabilities around the world.
I'm also curious because, as you said, you became interested in developing this app because of your experiences in physical therapy. And yet I met you at the National Strength and Conditioning Association conference, where there are quite a few physical therapists who go there because they are dual certified. Is this part of the plan to branch out or to continue to develop other uses of the app for the fitness or performance aspect?
Yes, we're definitely looking at expanding the capabilities into the more of the wellness and fitness space. We will be going back down to Baltimore, I guess, in a couple of weeks for the personal trainer conference that's going on down there. And we're starting to work into the wellness space with some therapists who are working with larger corporations developing wellness programs for the employees.
I think this is definitely a direction where technology is going. Any other directions that you're looking at going that you might want to share with us?
Well, we eventually would like to be able to connect with sensors to detect motion. I think that's, again, a longer range vision because it's certainly much more complicated, but that's something that we'd like to eventually end up with.
But on the other hand, the way technology is going, I know I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago, and literally, if you remember back in the early 2000s, the phone that you're carrying around in your pocket right now is much, much more powerful than that computer that you had then.
Oh, definitely. And it's quite interesting. Every once in a while, I'll get some people will tell me they're still using old flip phones, and they're very proud of that aspect. But certainly today's smartphones is so much more powerful than maybe 10 years ago on your computer or desktop.
The company is PTHelper. We'll have extensive links. For somebody who is a consumer of this app, is it a free download for the app, and then it's a charge for the personal trainer or physical therapy who's using it to add the exercises? Is that correct?
Well, there is a charge for the personal trainer and the therapist for the web service, but there is a $1.99 charge for the mobile app for the end user. It's a one-time fee, and it's theirs forever. They can access the same database of exercises that the therapist and the personal trainer and can create their own local favorite exercises. So that's one way where we're very different from other apps out there where they can create their own exercises based upon anything that's within our database.
And for less than $2.
And less than a medium cup of coffee.
PTHelper, I think when we hang up, I'll be downloading the app, or tonight I'll be downloading it because I think that's an interesting thing and I like to be up with the technology. Fred, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to FitLabPGH. I'm looking forward to seeing how PTHelper changes and develops the way exercises are programmed and provided for athletes and patients.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLabPGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLabPGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.